Steve in Zimmerman, Minnesota. Hey, Steve, what's on your mind?
I'm watching your program, and I agree with certain things you say about working class people are not getting the increase in wages that they should have. I mean, we're behind from where we should be.
Right, by about 300%.
Yeah.
I think it's 321% is how much productivity has gone up since Reagan went into office, and wages have gone up 0.1%. So all that gain in productivity has created an enormous amount of wealth, but it's all gone to the employer class.
Yeah, you're right on part of that. You know, the trade deals and sending all the working class jobs overseas, particularly to China, has really hurt the middle class.
That's right, and this was a program that Reagan started and George Herbert Walker Bush largely put into place.
They open that up? When Nixon was in office, he was big on
Nixon tried it. Yeah, Nixon opened the door, but I lived in China for a month in Beijing in 1988, in November of '88, and I was studying acupuncture at a hospital there. And there were, Americans were starting to show up. This was the last year of the Reagan presidency. And Americans were starting to show up and negotiate things, but there was literally nothing going on. I mean, Beijing was a third world city. The tallest buildings were 5 and 6 stories. Those were literally the tallest buildings in Beijing. Everything was built out of brick. The air was filled with haze from little charcoal coal briquettes, piles of these coal bricks in the middle of every street. So people would just go out and get them and bring them in, burn them in the stove. They heated only one room in the house throughout the winter. I mean, it was poor, poor, poor. There were no cars on the streets. I stood on Tiananmen Square, and one car would go by maybe every 10 minutes. It was just a sea of black bicycles. So that was just as it was cracking open. Now, I mean, we've all seen pictures of Beijing. But what did you disagree with me about?
Well, I have benefited from the tax cuts. I mean, this year I've seen I'm retired, but my wife is working, and she has seen an increase in her take-home pay and stuff. So it's not all the the really rich people, but
no, I get that. But Steve, engage in a
rich people taking advantage.
Yeah, Steve, let me interrupt you if I may, because we have just a minute until we're going to hit a break here that I can't control. Let's run this as a logic game. Let's say that you're making $100,000 a year and you're paying $25,000 a year in taxes. Your take home is $75,000. Your employer knows that you're willing to work for $75,000 a year, basically. And let's say that your taxes get cut to zero, and now you're making $100,000 from that employer. But that employer knows that you'll work for $75,000 a year. What do you think the employer is going to do over the next 2 or 3 years?
Trying to get you back to work for $75,000.
That's right. Your wages are going to go down. When working people, when the taxes are cut on working people, the result is over a period of time. And if you look at the tax tables, you'll see it takes 2 or 3 years. But over a period of time, those workers will be laid off and replaced with workers who are willing to work for less, or they themselves will be essentially forced into a position where they work for less, because employers pay based on take home. So tax cuts for rich people actually put more money in their pocket because they have control over their income. But tax cuts for working people who work for other people, tax cuts over time will cause wages to go down. The period of the fastest wage growth in the United States was the 40s, 50s, and 60s, when we actually had relatively high taxes on working people, too. Reagan cut taxes on working people as well as on the rich. And what it did is it drove down wages almost immediately. So that's the problem, Steve. Yeah, you might have an extra $500,000 in your paycheck right now, but that means that 2 years from now, 3 years from now, you're probably going to be working for $500 or $1,000 less. Steve, thanks for the call, and thanks for watching Free Speech. We'll be right back.